Ive had always believed that doing the right thing was its own reward. But on the morning she lost her job, she was not so sure anymore. She had been working as a security guard at the Meridian Tower in downtown Toronto for almost 2 years. It was not the career she had imagined for herself when she graduated from York University with a degree in public administration. But the economy had not been kind, and the job at least paid her rent and kept food on the table. So every morning Ive put on her uniform, clipped her badge to her chest, and showed up on time. That was something she could control. That particular Tuesday started like every other. It was early March, and the cold outside was the kind that cut through your coat, no matter how thick it was. The lobby of Meridian Tower was warm and bright, and Ive stood near the main entrance, checking visitor badges and directing people to the elevators. By mid-morning, the rush had slowed. Most of the office workers had already gone up to their floors. The lobby was quiet. That was when she saw him. An older man in a long grey coat was sitting on one of the lobby benches near the window. He had been there for a few minutes, and at first Ive assumed he was waiting for someone. But then she noticed the way his head had dropped slightly forward. His breathing looked wrong. Not the slow, relaxed breathing of someone resting. Something else, something urgent. Ive walked toward him quickly. The man's face had gone pale. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. On the floor beside his feet, a small orange pill bottle had rolled out of his jacket pocket and come to rest against the leg of the bench. Ive looked down the lobby. The concierge desk was empty. The other guard on duty had stepped away. There was no one. She knew the rules. Security personnel at Meridian Tower were not permitted to make physical contact with visitors or tenants outside of emergency protocols. All medical situations were to be referred immediately to building management or emergency services. She had been told this during her first week. It had been repeated again during the annual review last December, but the man's head was dropping lower. Ive reached out and steadied him with both hands. She guided him gently so he was sitting upright and would not fall forward. With her other hand, she reached for her radio and called it in immediately. Medical situation, lobby level, northwest bench requesting emergency services. Then she stayed with him. She spoke to him calmly, told him help was coming, kept her hands on his shoulders so he would not slide. His eyes opened slightly when he heard her voice. The paramedics arrived in under 4 minutes. By then, 2 managers from the building office had also appeared. One of them stood back and watched. The other, a man named Mr. Delaney, looked directly at Ive with an expression she did not like. After the paramedics had wheeled the man out and the lobby had settled, Mr. Delaney called Ive into the back office. He closed the door behind them. He spoke carefully, the way people do when they have already made a decision but want to sound reasonable. He said that Ive had failed to follow proper protocol, that she had made physical contact with a visitor without authorization, that Meridian Tower had liability considerations that could not be ignored. He said the company would be conducting a review, but given the circumstances, her employment would be suspended effective immediately pending that review. Ive listened. She did not raise her voice. She explained what she had seen, what she had assessed, and why she had acted the way she did. She said she had called it in before touching him. She said the man would have fallen and hit his head on the marble floor if she had stepped back. Mr. Delaney nodded slowly. He said he understood. Then he asked her to hand in her badge. She stood outside on Front Street, in the cold with her jacket half-zipped, holding the small paper bag they had given her for her personal items from her locker. A travel mug, a protein bar, a photo of her younger sister she had taped to the inside of the locker door. She stood there for a moment, and then she began walking toward the subway. The weeks that followed were not easy to describe, even later when Eve tried to put them into words. She applied to every security position she could find in the city. She applied to administrative roles, to reception positions, to anything that matched even part of her degree. Some places called her for interviews. A few went well enough that she left feeling hopeful, but the calls back either never came or came with the same phrase, "We've decided to move forward with another candidate." Her savings were enough for 2 months of rent. Then 1 month. Then the math started to get harder. She picked up shifts at a cafe near her apartment on Bloor Street. The owner was a Ghanaian woman who paid fairly and asked no difficult questions. Ife worked the early morning shifts, wiping tables and restocking the pastry display before the breakfast crowd came in. It helped. Not enough, but it helped. Her sister Taiwo called every few days from Ottawa. Taiwo was 3 years younger and worked in nursing, and she had the kind of steady, grounded energy that Ife had always leaned on in hard moments. During one of those calls, Ife found herself sitting on the floor of her apartment with her back against the bed, staring at the ceiling while Taiwo talked. She was not crying. She was past that. She was just very tired. A letter arrived on a Thursday. It was from her landlord. The building had been sold to a property development company, and all tenants were being given 60 days to vacate the premises. The letter used careful legal language, but the meaning was simple. She had to leave. Ife read it twice. Then she set it on the kitchen counter and stood there for a long time without moving. She had thought she was at her lowest point the morning she handed in her badge. She understood now that she had been wrong. The 60 days moved quickly in the worst possible way. Ife spent every free hour calling rental listings, knocking on doors in her neighborhood, asking anyone she knew if they had heard of a room or a basement suite. Toronto's rental market that year was brutal. Even rooms in shared houses were going for prices she could not afford without a steady income. A few landlords showed some interest, then went quiet when they heard she was between jobs. When the 60 days ended, most of the tenants in the building had already found somewhere to go. A few had stayed, hoping for more time. On the morning of the last day, Ife heard the sound of men in the hallway, heavy footsteps, the sound of things being moved. She opened her door and saw the superintendent standing at the end of the hall, with 2 men who had the blank, efficient manner of people doing a job they did not particularly enjoy. The superintendent looked at her with something that might have been apology, but he did not say anything. He just nodded toward the men and they moved forward. Ife stepped aside. She had already packed most of what mattered into 2 bags. She watched them carry her mattress out and lean it against the wall in the hallway. She watched them stack her small kitchen things in a box and set it near the stairwell. Then she picked up her 2 bags, walked down to the lobby and sat on the bottom step outside the front entrance because she did not know where else to go. She was still sitting there when the cars arrived. 2 black vehicles pulled up to the curb in front of the building, clean and quiet, the kind that did not rush. A man stepped out of the first one. He was well dressed, somewhere in his late 60s, with a kind of careful posture that came from years of moving through rooms where people watched him. He looked at the building, and then he looked at the tenants gathered near the entrance, and then his gaze moved to Ife sitting on the steps with her 2 bags. He said, "What is happening here?" The superintendent came forward and introduced him to the small crowd. His name was Mr. Okafor. He was the new owner of the building. Ife looked at him, and then something happened inside her chest, a quiet recognition, the way you know a face before you can explain why you know it. She stood up slowly. She looked more carefully. It was him, the man from the lobby of Meridian Tower, the man she had held upright while she called for the paramedics. He was standing right in front of her. She walked forward. "Excuse me," she said. "Good afternoon." Mr. Okafor looked at her. "Good afternoon. I hope your health has been well," Ife said. He paused. "My health? Yes." She kept her voice steady. "We have met before. I don't know if you remember." Mr. Okafor looked at her for a moment. "Where?" Ife took a breath. "At Meridian Tower," she said. "About 4 months ago, you were in the lobby and you became unwell. I was the security guard on duty." Something shifted in his face. Not full recognition, but something close to it. A door opening slightly. "I called emergency services," Ife continued, "and I stayed with you until they arrived." She looked down briefly, then back at him. "I was let go from that position afterward. They said I hadn't followed protocol." Mr. Okafor was quiet for a moment. "You lost your job?" "Yes." He looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at the 2 bags on the steps beside where she had been sitting. Then he turned to the superintendent and said, calmly, "Give everyone remaining in this building 2 more weeks. No one is to be removed today." The superintendent looked uncertain, but he nodded. Mr. Okafor looked back at Ife. "What is your name?" "Ife," she said. "Ife Adeyemi." He nodded slowly. I will look into what you've told me, he said. I want to confirm a few things. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed her a small card. Please wait to hear from my office. Then he turned, walked back to the vehicle, and left. That evening, Ive sat in the cafe on Bloor Street after her shift had ended. She turned the card over in her hands. She did not know what to make of it. She had learned not to place too much hope in things that had not happened yet. But she kept the card. Mr. Okafor's assistant reached out 6 days later. Her name was Miss Fontaine, and she spoke in the efficient, unhurried manner of someone who was very good at her job. She explained that Mr. Okafor had requested the incident records from Meridian Tower for the day in question. The records confirmed that a security employee named If Adeyemi had been suspended following a medical incident in the lobby, and that the suspension had been converted to termination after the internal review. She said Mr. Okafor would like to meet with Ive in person if she was available. Ive said she was available. The office was on the 32nd floor of a building on Bay Street. Miss Fontaine met her at reception and walked her to a corner office with a long window that looked out over the city. Mr. Okafor was standing near the window when she came in. He turned when he heard the door. Miss Adeyemi, he said. Thank you for coming. They sat across from each other at a round table near the window. Mr. Okafor had a folder on the table in front of him. He did not open it right away. I've reviewed what happened that morning, he said. I want to ask you something directly. Of course, I've said. When you helped me in that lobby, he said. You knew you were breaking the rules of your position. Yes, I've said. I knew. And you called for help before you made contact. Yes, I radioed it in first. Then I stayed with you because I was worried you would fall. Mr. Okafor looked at her evenly. Did you consider that you might lose your position over it? I've thought about this honestly. I thought about the rules, she said. But when I looked at you, I wasn't thinking about my position anymore. I just didn't want you to get hurt. Mr. Okafor was quiet for a moment. Then he said, How would you like me to repay you for what you did? The question caught Ive off guard. I'm sorry? You helped me, he said. You lost your job because of it. How can I repay you? Ive shook her head. I didn't help you so that someone would repay me. I understand that, Mr. Okafor said. But I am asking anyway. There's nothing, Ive said. I did what anyone should have done. He looked at her with an expression she could not fully read. It was not disbelief. It was something more like recalibration. You graduated from university, he said. It was not quite a question. Yes. Public administration from York. And since then, I've told him. She told him about the job market after graduation, about the 2 years at Meridian Tower, about the weeks after she was let go, the applications, the interviews that led nowhere, the cafe shifts, the letter from the landlord. She did not dramatize it. She just told him the way it had happened, one thing after another. Mr. Okafor listened without interrupting. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. I run several companies, he said finally. Property development, as you may have gathered, but also a logistics company and an investment firm. He paused. I am looking for a coordinator for the Community Partnerships Office of the development company. It involves working with municipal contacts, managing community consultation processes, drafting communications. He looked at her. Your degree is relevant. So is your composure. Ive looked at him steadily. I don't have direct experience in that field. I know, he said. We have an onboarding structure that would give you what you need. 3 months. After that, if you have performed well, the position is permanent. He folded his hands on the table. But I want you to understand, I am not offering you this position as payment for what you did for me. I am offering it because I believe, based on everything I have seen and confirmed, that you are the kind of person I want working in my organization. I've sat with that for a moment. I would like to accept, she said. Mr. Okafor nodded once. He reached across the table and they shook hands. As Ive left the building and stepped out onto Bay Street, the March air had softened slightly. Not warm yet, but less sharp than it had been. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment with the city moving around her, and she thought about the morning she had walked out of Meridian Tower with her travel mug and her protein bar and her sister's photo in a paper bag. She had been so certain, in that moment, that doing the right thing had cost her everything. 3 months later, Ife sat in her new office on the 14th floor of the Okafor Development Building on King Street West. Her desk faced the window, and she had put her sister's photo on the corner of it, where she could see it every time she looked up. The onboarding had not been simple. There were days when the learning curve felt steep, and the work required more of her than she thought she had. But she showed up every morning, and she asked the right questions, and she did not let the difficulty discourage her. On the last day of her probationary period, Ms. Fontaine appeared at her office door and told her that Mr. Okafor would like to see her upstairs. She took the elevator to the 32nd floor and knocked on the corner office door. "Come in," he said. He was seated at his desk this time. He looked up when she entered, and there was something quietly satisfied in his expression. He slid a document across the desk toward her. It was a permanent employment letter dated that day, with her name typed clearly at the top. She picked it up and read it. Her hands were very still. "This also came with the position," Mr. Okafor said. He set a key on the desk beside the letter. "There is a furnished apartment in Liberty Village. It is part of the senior staff package." He looked at her. "It is yours." Ife looked at the key. Then she looked at him. She had made a promise to herself, after those months of difficulty, that she would not let herself be caught off guard by good things, that she would receive them quietly and with gratitude, without making too much of them. But sitting in that office with the employment letter in her hands and the key on the desk in front of her, she felt the careful composure she had been holding for so long give way just slightly, the way ice does in early spring, gradually and then all at once. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was steady. "Thank you very much." Mr. Okafor looked at her with the same quiet expression. "You did the hard part," he said. "All of it?" And Ife believed him. Not because it was easy to believe, but because she had been there for every step of the hard part. And she knew exactly what it had cost her, and she knew just as clearly that she would do it all again.